Last night, Ed Markey made history by delivering the first loss to a Kennedy in Massachusetts history. So on Tuesday night, polls were called in the Massachusetts race, pitting the more progressive Ed Markey, backed by Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, small dollar donors, against Joe Kennedy III, backed by, of course, Nancy Pelosi and the establishment. And so I guess it really is appropriate for me to say, hold on, this.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Joe Kennedy. Down goes Joe Kennedy, even though he was actually the challenger. And Kennedy was the incumbent. Nonetheless, I'm sorry, Markey was the incumbent. But nonetheless, this was a pretty good outcome for progressives, as, again, Markey is the more progressive of the two, and actually is a big backer of the Green New Deal. So I want to show you a little bit of Markey's victory speech, just a little snippet of it. We'll get into some commentary, and then I'll show you some more. So let's start with a little bit of video. Take a look.
This campaign has always been about the young people of this country. You are our future. And thank you for believing in me, because I believe in you. And if we all keep believing together, we just may get my sneakers to last another 8 weeks on the campaign trail.
All right, so a little bit of humor in there. That's always fun. But look, let me point out how this was a bellwether race, right? And so, look, you had Ed Markey, who, again, had a little bit of a mixed record. Wasn't always as progressive as he was. But, again, that's part of being progressive, is changing your position with time, right? And so, again, he could have legitimately lost to Joe Kennedy III because he had a lot of advantages, but he didn't. Why? Because he did something that Democrats almost never do. He actually embraced the left instead of running away from it. He embraced the progressive movement and decided to, actually support progressive policy. And that's what's important. He signed on to the Green New Deal. He said, let's court young people, let's court progressives, let's not court large donors. And in that, I think that he was able to defeat a long-time political dynasty. And look, here's the thing about progressives. We care about policy more than anything, right? And I think that's what the establishment doesn't really understand about progressive voters, about young voters as well. We're not wowed by the Kennedy name. That said, Kennedys in the past have actually been fairly progressive throughout history, right? And Joe Kennedy III was very different in that respect, as he was center-left, more establishment Democrat. And so maybe had Joe Kennedy been a bit more progressive, like his forebears, then maybe he could have done better in this race. Maybe he would actually have beaten Ed Markey. And that's, of course, it would have come down to two progressives making the case that maybe one would be more effective than the other. It's possible, right? But, of course, being progressive is not at the core of who Joe Kennedy III was. Again, establishment, neoliberal, center-left, and really somebody who tried to coast in on his name. While Markey actually said things like this, and he was able to actually back it up. Take a look.
In this race, justice was on the ballot. Healthcare justice, that's Medicare for all and universal healthcare. Educational justice, so that every student has access to first-class schools and well-paid teachers. Economic justice, so that 3 billionaires don't hold more wealth than the bottom 50 percentile of our population combined. That's an economic system that's gone off the rails. Racial justice, so that we confront our history, make reparations, and root out the systemic racism that keeps us from achieving the promise of liberty and justice for everyone. Today and every day, we say Black lives matter, Black voices matter. And environmental justice, that's the Green New Deal. The one issue, combating the climate crisis which defines our future. Every other problem is linked to it. No solution to any challenge will be successful unless we address it. There will be no peace, no justice, and no prosperity unless we stop the march to climate destruction. This is a matter of life and death. The very future of our civilization depends upon it. There is no time for simply doing what we can. There is no time for compromise on the existential threat to our time. We must pass a Green New Deal.
So, look, all of that's progressive rhetoric. That's actually what we want to hear. And so you can understand why that message resonated with younger people, especially younger people, millennials as well, and progressives generally overall. And again, with younger people, Gen Z is going to have to deal with the results of what we do today. And right now, if we continue on our present course, it's not going to look good. An Australian think tank, for example, actually came to the conclusion that society will likely collapse by 2050 due to climate change. And so, they cite things like wars for resources, dwindling food supplies because all the farmland gets dried out from climate change, climate refugees, and all this stuff will basically strain governments to the point of where they're not able to stand anymore, and everything just kind of falls apart. And so that's, again, a pretty compelling reason to do something big and bold about climate change. Even if that does not come to pass, and we have a little bit more time, at some point, the climate change bill comes due. And if we don't want to, let our kids and grandchildren or great grandchildren have to pay that bill, we might want to do something right now. And that something is called the Green New Deal. And that's actually more bold than any other plan out there, that gets floated by Democrats. Joe Biden's plan, not nearly enough. And so, yes, it's an existential crisis. And in that context, nobody gives a damn what your daddy and uncle did if you're not going to work to try to fix that issue. That's it. We do need bold ideas. We need to build big. Not build back better, but we need to build boldly and big. And because it's society on the line. And look, let's be honest. Ed Markey's no spring chicken. He's 74 years old. He's not going to see the results of climate change. He's going to put in a lot of the work, but that's it. I mean, he's not going to see the fruits of actually what he's building today if we started with a Green New Deal. But he's still saying that because he actually does care about the future, and he does seem to care about young people, and that's important, right? So there's that. Now, there are some other takeaways from this race that are actually really interesting. It shows a waning influence of people like Nancy Pelosi, which is good. Nancy Pelosi openly endorsed Joe Kennedy III. Turns out her influence didn't mean a whole lot. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, however, she did lend her endorsement, not to Joe Kennedy III, but to Ed Markey, because they worked together in the Green New Deal. And he's also progressive. So she endorsed Markey after easily beating her more establishment opponent in her primary. And so her word, her weight, her credibility lended a lot to Markey's campaign as well. In fact, all of the squad are heading back to Congress, and they're going to bring allies. They're being joined by newcomers like Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush. And again, all the returning members of the squad. And then Markey also respecting the squad as well, even though they're first-term freshman congresswomen who anybody, a lot of people in the establishment did not take, they did not take them seriously. Well, Markey did. Markey worked with them, respected them, and that star power helped, I think, him to win. And so to beat back this challenger from the establishment. In fact, AOC in a tweet on Tuesday said the senator's win was a victory for the progressive movement, for 21st century policy and the Green New Deal. She said, "Thank you to every single voter, supporter, organizer, grassroots donor, and everyday person who helped make this happen." Now, in a separate tweet, she also said, on a personal note, "When I first got to Congress, the reception I got in many spaces was very chilly. Ed Markey wasn't afraid. He offered his expertise and partnership. He wasn't scared of big policy and didn't use kid gloves. It's great to watch him overcome the odds and win tonight." Sunrise Movement also was a big supporter of Ed Markey. Sunrise Movement, of course, made up primarily of people who are younger, who are going to have to deal with the effects of climate change. And so they've been very vocal, and they're an excellent, excellent organization. And they contributed greatly to Ed Markey's win as well. So now, what's the establishment saying? Well, I know one person who's not happy about this, Nate Silver. So Nate Silver basically put out a tweet saying, and I'm going to summarize it. It's a big deal, right? It's not like 97% of incumbents don't win their elections. Okay, sure. But this is a race that's not exactly like other races. Look, in a lot of races, you actually have a person, a challenger who is not very well known, doesn't have a lot of money, doesn't have a lot of support, can't really buy a lot of ads or have access to the voter data, especially now the Democratic establishment is hypocritically, by the way, not supporting challengers, not giving any sort of material support to people who challenge incumbents, unless you're Joe Kennedy III. So they have a real institutional disadvantage where incumbents enjoy a lot of advantages, especially that all-important name recognition. In this case, everybody knows who Joe Kennedy III is. He's a freaking Kennedy. Like, you know him. Even if you don't know him, you've heard of Kennedys. And most people go, "Oh, that's a Kennedy. I know what he's about. We'll just mark the vote for him because I know a Kennedy. I don't know who this other guy is." In this case, again, Markey did have the advantage of incumbency, but not the advantage of name recognition. Not over a Kennedy. And so, again, really, if you want to make that argument, Nate Silver, okay, well, you should make the argument of Richard Neal versus Alex Morse. Alex Morse, nobody knows who he is. He ran against one of the most powerful Democrats in the House, Richard Neal. In that case, name recognition meant a lot. That's why a lot of these challengers, progressive challengers, don't just run once, they run twice. Cori Bush ran twice. She won the second time. And so usually the second time, you have enough name recognition built up in your community because you've had time to be able to establish yourself. That's effective. And again, it doesn't always work, but generally a second time is more effective. And so name recognition, like I said, matters a lot. But Nate Silver, a little salty, as well as the rest of the Democratic establishment over this. So, oh, by the way, Joe Kennedy III was also given a televised response to the Trump State of the Union. So he was held in very high regard by the establishment. And now, well, he gave up his House seat to run against Markey and then lost. So he's out of government now. Out of government. Gone, which means it's very likely that he will either retire from public life or become a lobbyist. I'd vote for option 2. And so, again, this was a big victory for progressives, for policy, because unlike, and I like to make the okay boomer joke, right? But when it comes to boomers, it's really more of a mindset than anything. And so Markey does not have the boomer mindset because he's open to adaptability. He's open to change. He's open to new ideas. He's open to progressive values. And that does make you progressive. And so congratulations to Ed Markey on a hell of a win, a hell of a victory. And we hope you continue to do what you say you're going to do and continue on this path in Congress to push for a better future for all Americans.